Espero que si te gusta, den like, que ves en el canal y comencemos una nueva partida. Como la molla, la antena y bueno, ahí está eso todo. Ok, comencemos esto. A mí me encanta este juego. A mí me encanta, por eso lo juego muchas veces, porque me encanta. No tengo esto. Me encanta cómo se ve. Este juego es beautiful. Pero vamos a leer todo.
Hello everyone, I'm Dan Pinchbeck, I'm the creative director of the Chinese Room, and this is the Dear Esther developers commentary.
Hi, I'm Rob Briscoe, I'm the artist on Dear Esther.
And I'm Jessica Curry, and I was the composer on the game.
So what you're looking at today is a remake of a mod. Dear Esther started off in 2007 as a Half-Life 2 mod.
Espérate un momento. No sé qué decir eso ahí.
That did really well in the modding community, which was fantastic, and as a result of that attracted the attention of Rob, who worked as the primary developer on a Source remake of the game that was released in 2012. And this year,
so you'll see around you in a lot of the environments there's a lot of detail ingrained into everything. One of the things that I wanted to do with Dear Esther is bring the visuals up to the same kind of level of detail that Dan and Jess had put into the other areas of the game. So all of the history and the kind of hidden pieces of story that are intertwined with the VOs and the music and stuff, I kind of wanted to bring some of that into the environments.
Espera, tío, espera.
So if you
Esta
look
madre
around
aquí, yo le puse esa mierda ahora y ahora no se lo puedo quitar. No, tengo que tumbarlo para atrás. Esa mierda no me gusta. No se puede, tío. Vamos a quitarle eso de ahí, tío.
hello everyone, I'm Dan Pinchbeck, I'm the creative director of the Chinese Room, and this is the Dear Esther developers commentary.
Hi, I'm Rob Briscoe, I'm the artist on Dear Esther.
And I'm Jessica Curry, and I was the composer on the game.
So what you're looking at today is a remake of
So you'll see around you in a lot of the environments there's a lot of detail ingrained into everything. One of the things that I wanted to do with Dear Esther is bring the visuals up to the same kind of level of detail that Dan and Jess had put into the other areas of the game. So all of the history and the kind of hidden pieces of story that are intertwined with the VOs and the music and stuff, I kind of wanted to bring some of that into the environments. So if you look around you, you see that there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces, a piece of paper with someone's name on it, a photograph, an ultrasound. All of these little bits and pieces are kind of laid in to just kind of bring another aspect of the story into the game. And also, they're actually randomized, so every time you play you'll see something different lying around. And this is just to build on this idea that everybody has a unique experience and a unique interpretation of the story.
Esta madre, no se la puedo quitar ahora. ¿Qué vamos a hacer? No se la puedo quitar aquí. Me encanta que me encanta, tío. Queda hay unos puntos a meter, tío. El segundo fantasma está hay como una luz allá abajo alumbrando y apagando. Segundo fantasma, tío. Este juego yo lo digo como si fuera una historia, es una historia. Una lata de pintura. Pintura, tío. Hello. Hello. ¿Quién es? Bien. No se encuentra. No sé más o menos a qué hora llegue. Ok, igual. Bueno, aquí llaman todos los días. Ustedes no se cansan de llamar. Olvídate de eso, ya no quieren saber de eso.
When I wrote the music for the mod of Dear Esther, there was absolutely no budget whatsoever for live players, so all the music was sampled. But one of the good things about that is it actually forced me to be quite creative about how I wrote.
¿Cómo yo le quito esa mierda de ahí? ¿Cómo yo puedo quitar eso de ahí? Es que no me deja quitarle eso de ahí. Esto no.
Wrote the music, so with my background in sound art,
Me deja quitárselo.
I wanted to use samples in a different way that wasn't just using it to sound like a violin. I wanted to time stretch and manipulate samples to make something different and strange and quite unique. But then when we got the Indie Fund money, I had the amazing opportunity to re-record the music with live players. And that was so exciting for me, actually, because that's where it comes to life. And I thought long and hard about whether to write new music, going from the mod to the commercial version, but actually I decided that my initial and original emotional response to the game was probably going to be the strongest.
Tío, me van a perdonar, pero yo no me gusta eso hablando. Yo le quito esa mierda de ahí.
Response and reaction that I had, so I just literally, the music that I'd written for samples I then wrote out for live instruments, but what they bring to it is transformative, actually, and I think the beach is a really good example of this.
Qué porquería esa. Primero. así.
The gulls do not land here anymore.
Ahora sí está mejor.
I've noticed that this year they seem to shun the place.
Eso ya yo lo hice.
Maybe it's the depletion of the fishing stock driving them
Ahora no me
away.
importa, ahora puedo seguir por
Perhaps it's me. When he first landed here, Donnelly wrote that the herds were sickly and their shepherds the lowest of the miserable classes that populate these Hebridean islands. 300 years later, even they have departed.
Es que me encanta este juego. Un poquito de café, voy a hacer una tacita de café, pongo una tacita en su lado, lo que sea, disfruten de este video. A mí me gusta este juego. Puedes meter en el agua, no te va a morir. El agua se ve real. Es muy beautiful. A mí me encanta.
There was once talk of a wind farm out here, away from the rage and the intolerance of the masses. The sea, they said, is too rough for the turbines to stand. They clearly never came here to experience the becalming for themselves. Personally, I would have supported it. Turbines would be a fitting contemporary refuge for a hermit. The revolution and the permanence. Dear Esther, I found myself to be as featureless as this ocean, as shallow and unoccupied as this bay, a listless wreck without identification. My rocks are these bones, and a careful fence to keep the precipice at bay. Shot through me caves, my forehead a mount. This aerial will transmit into me so. All overexposed, the nervous system, where Donnelly's boots and yours and mine still trample. I will carry a torch for you. I will leave it at the foot of my headstone. You will need it for the tunnels that carry me under.
Aquí lo mejor que tiene este juego son las cuevas. Son brutales. Le recomiendo este juego, el que no lo ha jugado, que lo jueguen. Sé que a muchas personas no les gusta, no les va a gustar, pero hay otras personas que puede que les guste. Y a mí es una de ellas. A mí me encanta este juego. Este juego a mí me fascina. Una experiencia total jugar este juego, como si estuviera andando.
A wonderful sight. The moon cresting the junction between the cliff path and the stone circle. It cast a shadow of the ridge across the beach, all the world as if you had signed your name in untidy handwriting.
When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boats, and know to send aid or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff path died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this: to keep any would-be rescuers at bay. The infection is not simply of the flesh. I quote directly: a motley lot with little to recommend them. I have now spent 3 days in their company. That is, I fear, enough for any man not born amongst them. Despite their tedious inclination to quote scripture, they seem to me the most God-forsaken of all the inhabitants of the outer isles. Indeed, in this case, the very gravity of that term, forsaken by God, seems to find its very apex. It appears to me that Donnelly, too, found those who wander this shoreline to be adrift from any chance of redemption. Did he include himself in that, I wonder? Dear Esther, I met Paul. I made my own little pilgrimage. My Damascus, a small semi-detached on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. We drank coffee in his kitchen and tried to connect to one another. Although he knew I hadn't come in search of an apology, reason or retribution, he still spiraled in panic, thrown high and lucid by his own dented bonnet. Responsibility had made him old. Like us, he'd already passed beyond any conceivable boundary of life.
Que si te hunde, no te mueres. No. Estaba viendo como una antena.
Come back.
Dice, comba, vuelve para atrás.
I find myself increasingly unable to find that point where the hermit ends and Paul and I begin. We are woven into a sodden blanket, stuffed into the bottom of a boat to stop the leak and hold back the ocean. My neck aches from staring up at the aerial. It mirrors the dull throb in my gut where I am sure I've begun to form another stone. In my dreams, it forms into a perfect representation of Lot's wife, head over her shoulder, staring along the motorway at the approaching traffic in a vacuum of fatalistic calm. dreamt I stood in the center of the sun, and the solar radiation cooked my heart from the inside. My teeth will curl and my fingernails fall off into my pockets like loose change. If I could stomach, I'd eat, but all I seem capable of is salt water. Were the livestock still here, I could turn feral and gorge. I'm as emaciated as a body on a slab, opened up for a premature source of death. I've rowed to this island in a heart without a bottom, all the bacteria of my gut rising up to sing to me.
Bien amigos, aquí se acaba la primera parte. Ahora aquí se acaba la primera parte, deja un like, comencemos la otra.
Dear Esther, I have now driven the stretch of the M5 between Exeter and Bristol over 21 times. But although I have all the reports and all the witnesses, and have cross-referenced them within a millimetre using my ordnance survey maps, I simply cannot find the location. You'd think there would be marks to serve as some evidence. It's somewhere between the turn-off for Sanford and the welcome brake services. But although I can always see it in my rear-view mirror, I have as yet been unable to pull ashore.
Siempre cojo que lo coge a la derecha, pero por la izquierda, pero siempre cojo por la izquierda. Hay un fantasma ahí, voy a ver el fantasma allí. Un fantasma ahí.
It's only at night that this place makes any sluggish effort at life. You can see the buoy and the aerial. I've been taking to sleeping through the day in an attempt to resurrect myself. I can feel the last days drawing upon me. There's little point now in continuation. There must be something new to find here. Some nook or some cranny that offers a perspective worth clinging to. I've burnt my bridges. I've sunk my boats and watched them go to water.
Nunca he llegado ahí arriba a la antena. Yo sé que todo esto, pero no me dejan meterme, nunca he buscado así. Quiero meter adentro del bote, pero no me dejan. No me gusta hacer nada. No me dejan.
There must be a hole in the bottom of the boat. How else could new hermits have arrived? I had kidney stones, and you visited me in the hospital. After the operation, when I was still half submerged in anesthetic, your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk. What charnel house lies at the foot of this abyss? How many dead shepherds could fill this hole? I've begun my ascent on the windless slope of the western side. The setting sun was an inflamed eye squeezing shut against the light shone in by the doctors. My neck is aching from constantly craning my head up to track the light of the aerial. I must look downwards, follow the path under the island to a new beginning. The bothy was constructed originally in the early 1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jacobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians. He was not considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did not work. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either. Inventory. A trestle table we spread wallpaper on in our first home. A folding chair. I laughed at you for bringing camping in the lakes. I was uncomfortable later and you laughed then. This diary, the bed with the broken springs. Once asleep you have to remember not to dream. A change of clothes. Donnelly's book, stolen from Edinburgh Library on the way here. I will burn them all on the last morning and make an aerial of my own.
Sueño, es que me acuesto muy tarde. Ay. No, hemos andado mucho, que mira, estábamos allá detrás de
He
aquella
left his body to the
montañita.
medical school and was duly opened out for a crowd of students
Hemos andado
21 days
mucho,
after his
mucho,
passage.
mucho.
The report is included in my edition of his book. The syphilis had torn through his guts like a drunk driver, scrambling his organs like eggs on a plate. But enough definition remained for a cursory examination, and, as I suspected, they found clear evidence of kidney stone. He's likely to have spent the last years of his life in considerable pain. Perhaps this is the root of his laudanum habit. Although its use makes him an unreliable witness, I find myself increasingly drawn into his orbit. They found Jacobsen in early spring. The thaw had only just come. Even though he'd been dead nearly 7 months, his body had been frozen right down to the nerves and had not even begun to decompose. His fingernails were raw and bitten to the quick. They found the phosphorescent moss that grows in the caves deep under the nails. Whatever he'd been doing under the island when his strength began to fail is lost. He'd struggled halfway up the cliff again, perhaps in a delirium, perhaps trying to reach the bothy's fire before curling into a stone and expiring. Climbing down to the caves, I slipped and fell and have injured my leg. I think the femur is broken. It is clearly infected. The skin has turned a bright, tight pink, and the pain is crashing in on waves, winter tides against my shoreline, drowning out the ache of my stones. I struggled back to the bothy to rest, but it has become clear that there is only one way this is likely to end. The medical supplies I looted from the trawler have suddenly found their purpose. They will keep me lucid for my final ascent.
No hay nada hoy, gracias a Dios. Juegan muchas veces, salen cosas diferentes. Una maleta con un trapo y papeles. Eso es lo que es. Segundo capítulo. Solamente lo quedan 2 capítulos.
Did Jakobsen crawl this far? Can I identify the scratches his nails ruined into the rocks? Am I following him, cell for cell, inch for inch? Why did he turn back on himself and not carry through to the ascent? They'd stop the traffic back as far as the Sanford Junction and come up the hard shoulder like radio signals from another star. It took 21 minutes for them to arrive. I watched Paul time it to the second on his watch. I'm traversing my own death throes. The infection in my leg is an oil rig that dredges black muck up from deep inside my bones. I swallow fistfuls of diazepam and paracetamol to stay conscious. The pain flows through me like an underground sea. cannot be the shaft they threw the goats into. It cannot be the landfill where the parts of your life that would not burn ended up. It cannot be the chimney that delivered you to the skies. It cannot be the place where you rained back down again to fertilize the soil and make small flowers in the rocks.
No sorprendí. Subir de arriba. Ya te viene siendo el último capítulo. Hoy no hay ficha aquí, peseta, peseta, cosas así. El último capítulo. Pasa instantánea la música. Y terminamos con el último capítulo. Gente no deja nada porque ya la gente lo vieron. Ok, tío, este es el último capítulo de la entera. Así que la luna se ve brutal.
wish I could have known Donald in this place. We would have had so much to debate. Did he paint these stones or did I? Who left the pots in the hut by the jetty? Who formed the museum under the sea? Who fell silently to his death into the frozen waters? Who erected this godforsaken aerial in the first place? Did this whole island rise to the surface of my stomach, forcing the gulls to take flight?
I returned home with a pocket full of stolen ash. Half of it fell out of my coat and vanished into the car's upholstery. But the rest I carefully stowed away in a box I kept in a drawer by the side of my bed. It was never intended as a meaningful act, but over the years it became a kind of talisman. I'd sit still, quite still for hours, just holding the diminishing powder in my palm and noting its smoothness. In time we will all be worn down into granules, washed into the sea and dispersed.
Bueno, estamos llegando, ya estamos casi cerca.
There were chemical stains on the tarmac, the leak of air conditioning, brake fluid and petrol. He kept sniffing at his fingers as he sat by the roadside, waiting as if he couldn't quite understand or recognize their smell. He said he'd been travelling back from a sales conference in Exeter. He'd stopped for farewell drinks earlier, but had kept a careful eye on his intake. You could hear the sirens above the idling traffic. From here, I can see my armada. I collected all the letters I'd ever meant to send to you, if I'd have ever made it to the mainland, but had instead collected at the bottom of my rucksack, and I spread them out along the lost beach. Then I took each and every one, and I folded them into boats. I folded you into the creases, and then, as the sun was setting, I set the fleet to sail. Shattered into 21 pieces, I consigned you to the Atlantic. And I sat here until I'd watched all of you sink.
Juego de pájaro. Parece que son eso. Muy bien, tíos. Vamos a el último caminito. Que ya no sé ni qué jugar ya.
When Paul keeled over dead on the road to Damascus, they resuscitated him by hitting him in the chest with stones gathered by the roadside. He was lifeless for 21 minutes, certainly long enough for the oxygen levels in his brain to have decreased and caused hallucinations and delusions of transcendence. I'm running out of painkillers, and the moon has become almost unbearably bright. I've begun my voyage in a paper boat without a bottom. I will fly to the moon in it. I've been folded along a crease in time, a weakness in the sheet of life. Now you've settled on the opposite side of the paper to me. I can see your traces in the ink that soaks through the fibre, the pulped vegetation. When we become waterlogged and the cage disintegrates, we will intermingle. When this paper aeroplane leaves the cliff edge and carves parallel vapor trails in the dark, we will come together. If only Donnelly had experienced this, he would have realized he was his own shoreline, as am I. Just as I am becoming this island, so he became his syphilis, retreating into the burning synapses, the stones, the infection.
¿Por qué este se ve rojo? No sé, tío, Dios, aquí se ve chulería de parte aquí. Es muy precioso este parque. Tremendo, tío. Estamos secándolo ya al final.
Headlights reflected in these retinas. Too long in the tunnels of my island without a bottom. The sea creatures have risen to the surface, but the gulls are not here to carry them back to their nests. I've become fixed, open and staring, an eye turned on itself. I've become an infected leg whose tracking lines form a perfect map of the junctions of the M5. I will take the exit at mid-thigh and plummet to my Este.
A gull perched on a spent bonnet, sideways, whilst the sirens fell through the middle distance and the metal moaned in grief about us. I'm about this night in walking, old bread and gull bones, old Donnelly at the bar gripping his drink, old Esther walking with our children, old Paul as ever, old Paul. He shakes and he shivers and he turns off his lights alone.
I've run out of places to climb. I will abandon this body and take to the air.
Dear Esther, I have burned the cliffs of Damascus. I have drunk deep of it. My heart is my leg, and a black line etched on the paper all along this boat without a bottom. You are all the world like a nest to me. Eggs unbroken form like fossils, come together, send small black flowers to the air. From this infection, hope. From this island, flight. From this grief, love.
Y acabó. Al final. Bueno. Y acabó. Gracias amigos por ver este video. Si te gustó, deja un like, suscríbete en el canal y los vemos en otro juego, en otro video. Ya, terminamos. Terminamos aquí. Muy bien, tío. Muy bien por este video.